treatment. So even within this church community, there might be 5% of persons who are experiencing depressive symptoms and not getting the treatment. Substance use disorder has also constantly become more popular during the pandemic. Sometimes we don't recognize that as a mental illness, but it is, because it affects your potential, your functioning, and your relationships. Schizophrenia and bipolar disorder can cause catastrophic loss in a person's life, including loss of life, and not just for the individual, but for other persons. There's a high risk of suicide among that population, and that's the population that experiences a lot of times the most of the stigma. Anxiety can also cause multiple presentations to the emergency room as it masquerades as other illnesses. A lot of times persons might come in for palpitations, chest pain, and it has nothing to do with a heart attack. But that's what they feel, and they consistently be going to the ER every week because of these symptoms and not willing to be treated for an anxiety disorder, even though all other tests have come back normal. So let's go into scripture. Earlier we read in John where there was a demon-possessed person, right? And Jesus' response and even the community's response to that person. But there are several scriptures in the Bible where persons experience a mental illness or is experiencing symptoms of a mental illness, and it was not even deemed a demon possession. There was Job, David, Jeremiah, Elijah. Even in Kings, he cries out, "I have had enough, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors who have already died." He wanted to die, and that's how sad and that's how just distraught he felt at that time. And in Job, he said, "Depression haunts my days. At nights my bones are filled with pain, which gnaws at me relentlessly." This is such significant feelings of sadness noted even in the Bible, right? Sometimes we read these scriptures and we admire these persons and what they have been through and their strength and their reliance on the Lord, but we sometimes ignore the fact that even during that time, they also struggled. And in terms of Mark 5, verses 1 to 20, this man, there was a gentleman who clearly did not have good mental health. He was chained hand, foot, he cut himself with stones, he made a lot of noise, right? That's a good description of somebody who seems to have like a psychotic disorder that we'd see like when we're walking on the road and we see someone like that. The key sentence in that passage, Jesus had compassion for the man. And this just shows how much he is in concern and he has a desire to make sure that we are well mentally, not just physically. Everyone in the town was afraid, even in the healing, and asked Jesus to leave town. So you see the contradiction between how Jesus responded to this person and how the persons in the town had responded to that person. And this is centuries later, and as a matter of fact, sometimes that's how it is. Even as a psychiatrist, I can be stigmatized. Persons might feel, you're a psychiatrist, something must be wrong with you too, you know? Or sometimes I'd hear, "Oh, you're a psychiatrist, but you look normal, man." You know, I don't know what that's supposed to mean, but yes. So even in dealing with mental illnesses, they might be afraid of you. "Oh, you work at Bellevue. Oh, you must work at Bellevue. You're not afraid." You know, stuff like that. I'm going to go through this part quickly. So why does it hurt? What causes mental illnesses? First of all, there are adverse childhood experiences, stressors, cognitive distortions, lifestyle practices, poor relationships, and poor boundaries, which I'll expound as we go along. So adverse childhood experiences are experiences that you've had growing up, what you've experienced during childhood. Many of us have experienced a lot of abuse in many different ways, neglect, in many different ways. We might not even see it that way, but we didn't see our parents weren't around us. We had to fend for ourselves a lot. Probably we saw domestic violence within our home, and probably we saw a parent or a guardian who chronically used a substance. And in that time when they were using a substance, they were aggressive, they were dependent, they were neglectful, and many other things. Also, if you had a parent who was incarcerated, or even parents who were separated or divorced, lots of things can affect children long term into adulthood. And this is not just for mental health, but this is also for physical health. And the average person has been through at least one or two adverse childhood experiences, and many persons have been through 3 or 4. And once it reaches at least 4, it increases the risk of chronic illnesses, diabetes, hypertension, stroke, substance abuse, amongst many other illnesses, not just mental illnesses. Stressors, unavoidable. We all experience stress, and it starts from very young. Sometimes we think that our children aren't experiencing stress, but they are. Teenagers, it's a hard world out there. Even though the adults are the one paying the bills, we have to make sure that they're fed. All of those things. Everyone is experiencing some level of stress. And stress can be sometimes good. It can be, I got a new job. It can be a pregnancy. It can be, you're moving to a new location, you're migrating, something you were looking forward to. But everything that you experience can carry some level of stress. And sometimes the stress is internal. Sometimes you are the one who tends to be stressing yourself out because you want to be perfect. You want to achieve all of these things that might take a little longer to achieve than you had hoped. Cognitive distortions are basically thought patterns that we might have where we think things negatively. So, for example, there might be, it's a few slides down. I want them to see this slide so that they can follow. It's a few slides down. Oh, okay. All right, so I'm just going to speak about there are 12 common cognitive distortions, one of which I'm just going to go through quickly, mind reading. So in mind reading, we might assume what a person is thinking. So suppose your boss passes you in the morning at work and they didn't say good morning, right? You automatically assume that your boss doesn't like you. And then it ruins your whole day. Because instead of thinking, oh, maybe he's just distracted or she's just distracted, maybe she just got a bad call, maybe she didn't see me or something, but you immediately jump to what is negative. And these cognitive distortions increase the risk of depression and anxiety. Something maybe you also did not give in a deadline. For example, you didn't meet a deadline, and you feel like, oh, because I didn't meet the deadline, I must lose this job. I'm definitely going to lose this job, even though I've made one mistake, I'm going to lose it. And that's what happens with fortune telling, which also increases our risk of depression and anxiety. And then we'll move on to relationships and boundaries. Unhealthy relationships can cause mental health problems, right? Particularly when the person is younger, relationships are very important to you, more important than other things in your life. So within the teenage years, friendships that go sour, they might be their first infatuation, first love, and it didn't work out the way that they wanted it to, and they just feel like their life should end right now, and it's because of the importance that they might have in their life. Or young adulthood, and you got married to somebody and you felt like, yes, this is it's going to be perfect, marriage is going to be great, and then you realize that the person isn't who you expected, or the marriage isn't going the way you had hoped, and then you start to become depressed, withdrawn, maybe even start using substances. And then there's also a problem with boundaries. When our boundaries are poor, we might often allow persons and things to affect us a whole lot. We're unable to say no to persons. We're unable to say, I don't like that the way you speak to me. Can you speak to me in a better tone? We're unable to say those things. And because of that, persons constantly beat on us, and then we think of ourselves negatively. And then there's lifestyle practices. Let's not ignore that the way we treat our body, our mental health will be affected. So, for example, if you're not eating well, you're not exercising, you're not spending time with the Lord, you're using substances, it's going to affect your mental health, because your body and your mental health, they're connected. They're not separate units. What if you ignore it? You get accustomed to the symptoms. Relationships slowly ruined, poor academic and career achievement, and mental illnesses might develop, medical illnesses might develop, or it just might go away when the stressor resolves. So I'm not saying that in every single episode, if you don't get treatment, the mental illness will stay. Sometimes you do get over that time, but it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to get help. So basically, it's like getting used to the smell. Sometimes when it comes on to mental illness, you might have gotten used to just being anxious all the time. I'm just an anxious person. That's just who I am. But let's also not forget that persons can get physically ill because of untreated mental illnesses, because there is a hormone in your body, a stress hormone, which is cortisol. And cortisol can be increased in any type of mental illness that you're experiencing. And cortisol can affect your body if it is prolonged, if there's a prolonged elevation in its amount. Symptoms include illnesses can include heart disease, other chronic illnesses such as diabetes, hypertension. You might even have obesity or being underweight. You're not eating or you're overeating. Or you might have frequent colds, or every evening I have a headache. It's because you're always or chronically stressed. All right, what can I do to help mental illness? There are 3 things that I would like to break down. There's lifestyle changes, there's therapy, and there's medication. And because we're a holistic family here, we want to focus on those 3 things. Sometimes, as a psychiatrist, yes, I prescribe medication. Persons might be saying, oh, well, doc, I don't think I reached the medication stage yet. As though it is always a stage thing. It's not always a stage thing, even though, yes, for some illnesses, mild can be treated with lifestyle changes and therapy only. Sometimes it's the type of mental illness that would need medication, and not necessarily that you're severe, if you understand what I mean. So basically, there are illnesses which I think are catastrophic, such as a substance use disorder. And medication isn't quite, well, there are a few, but medication is not regularly prescribed for that. Does that mean that it's a mild illness? No. So medication does not equate severity of illness, at least not all the time. So there are different types of therapy. There's talk therapy, you can have couples therapy, family therapy, play therapy, group therapy. Group therapy, unfortunately, not as common here as I would like it to be. I think it would be better because it would be more affordable. Sometimes to get individual therapy can range between $4,000 to $12,000, which can be costly for some persons, even though it can be very beneficial and life-changing. And so I think group therapy is one thing that persons could offer some more, so that many persons can get some help, basically. And therapy might seem sometimes like it won't be effective, because persons are like, I don't think talking to somebody is going to help me. But you'll be surprised, because it's not Talk therapy is not just company. It's not just somebody to talk to, even though that is a huge component. But it is a scientific process where studies have been done to show how and what to do to help somebody to overcome certain illnesses and situations. There are different types of medication, because we had mentioned different types of illnesses: depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. Those are some four common illnesses. And for those, we have different types of medication, whether it's antidepressants, sleep aids, antipsychotics, and mood stabilizers. Some medication might overlap. So for example, you might have one that can be both as an antipsychotic and a mood stabilizer, such as quetiapine. Based on the components, the medication can help both to stop hearing voices or seeing things, feeling like persons want to hurt you, but it might also help the mood. So if you're going from extreme to extreme, it can help to balance the mood as well. And I just want to note that antidepressants are not addictive. A lot of times persons might think, oh, I'm on an antidepressant and I don't want to be dependent on it. It is not addictive. Yes, you'd have to be weaned off of it, not because of addiction, but because of other things. Like you don't want to have side effects from stopping it suddenly, right? But it is not habit forming like alcohol would be. Some sleep aids can be habit forming, and so therefore, most of the times we try lifestyle changes first, some talk therapy first, and then if those fail, we'll give a short period of sleep aid. Or sometimes we start some sleep aids first while you're doing the therapy. So by the time you get into a habit of going to bed early, though, you can start practicing or implementing those lifestyle changes. And then we also want to make sure to speak about self-care. Self-care is basically the habits developed to manage your mental health. And self-care is not just a woman thing, and it is not just candles, music, and shower gel, right? Sometimes when we think self-care, we think, oh, light some candles and go and have a nice shower with some Bath and Body Works. That's not what self-care is just about. Self-care can be divided into different aspects. You have emotional self-care, physical self-care. So in the emotional self-care, you want to make sure that you're honest with yourself. You're having safe boundaries. You're learning to say no, accepting your feelings, accepting your flaws, being vulnerable with persons you trust. That is way more effective than any candle you're going to buy at Fontana, right? If you can learn to do that, you'd be surprised how better you feel about yourself and about others. And remember, physical, any kind of movement. I endorse exercise. Even in this pregnancy, I try to exercise as much as possible, even if it's just a little 10-minute walk, because movement wakes you up. It brings you out of a moment of basically like, you know, when you wake up and you just feel groggy and you just feel slow, sometimes even a little bit of exercise energizes you. Drinking some tea, eating some warm and comforting foods. Sometimes a cup of peppermint can go a far way. You're feeling upset, you know, you and your spouse or you and your child has had an argument. Just step away for a minute, make yourself a cup of tea, just sit down and just pray for just 1 minute, and you will see how much it helps. And having some fun foods in moderation. Let's not stigmatize food as well. Let's not say, what's wrong with going and getting some ice cream? What's wrong with having a slice of cake with moderation? Sometimes some fun food is what you need to just sit down and just have a moment to yourself. Giving and receiving affection is also very important. We're not alone, we're not isolated, and giving can make you feel better about yourself. Taking care of your body, and of course, having relaxing showers and baths. And very important, adequate sleep. Poor sleep affects us significantly. spiritual self-care is very important. When we're far from the Lord, when we feel far from the Lord, when we're not dependent on the Lord, it can make us rely too much on how we feel and how much stress and everything is affecting us. Because the Lord knows, how we're built, and He knows our weaknesses, and He knows our flaws, and He knows exactly what we're going through. And He knows that part of our mental health and part of our physical health is relying on Him. It is not just because He's up, He's here wanting to be worshipped. He wants to help us. We are the one who need Him. He doesn't need us. You understand? And so prayer, meditation, helping others, and gratitude, very important. Very important. Socially, reaching out to others, working on similar interests, having adventures with others, sharing hobbies, learning to shut off and get quiet time, very important. We need to interact with persons, which is why during the pandemic, it was very difficult for a lot of persons. Anxiety skyrocketed during the pandemic. Persons are still recovering from 2020, still recovering because of being isolated. And not just being isolated, but being afraid of illnesses, being afraid of, somebody who died, you have a family member who died, you're afraid to come out again. But we need other persons. And I was so happy when I came here today and saw what seemed like a full complement of the church. It seemed like a lot of persons were here this morning, and it's so good to see that persons are back out interacting with other persons. So, lastly, how to speak to someone who you might suspect needs help. There are some simple sentences you can say to someone, because sometimes I think even within church we might notice that something is going on, but we just don't know what to say to the person. So here are some examples of some sentences you can use. How have you been feeling? Just straight out. Sometimes persons need you to be direct. How have you been feeling? Sometimes you might want to say, I'm here if you want to talk. Right? Or you might say, I care about you and I'm here if you need anything. But sometimes persons might not, even though you say you're here, they don't trust that, they don't know if they should believe you, so they don't come and reach out. So sometimes you just have to say, I've noticed you've been distant, and I was wondering if you want to talk about it. So these are just 4 examples of ways you can approach somebody who you suspect might need some mental health. And as we go on, we're going to speak about ways and interventions and different things you can reach out, different avenues you can reach out to in order to get some treatment. Thank you very much.
And now we'll hear from our sister, Jessica Tyler Shaw.
Thank you so much for that, for the invitation. I am just here to give you a little synopsis of what I do at the Bellevue Hospital as a social worker. So, as Doc would have said earlier, when a person is diagnosed with a mental illness, their functioning is disturbed. And as social workers, our major role is to help to get persons back to a state of functioning. And so all the duties that we complete on a daily basis, it's to this effect. I consider myself a psychiatric social worker because we work in a setting where, with clients with mental illness, and our specific training is to help persons in this area to live fruitful lives. So on a daily basis, what I do, and just mirroring what Zastra says, we are enablers as social workers. We articulate the needs of persons and see how best we can find persons in the community or in other areas that are able to actually help our clients. We're also brokers. We link and network our clients with other agencies. So we work closely with welfare agencies, especially those that provide financial assistance, whether it be financial in terms of assisting with medication or with the children of our clients who are mentally ill, etc. So we reach out as best as possible. We also advocate for the needs of our patients. And this is something that we at the Bellevue Hospital needs assistance with. We need family members also to be involved in this advocacy work. We need church members to be involved in this advocacy work, because it is not okay to say to say mental illness is everybody's business and leave it at that, right? If it's everybody's business, then indeed corporate Jamaica, the churches, everybody needs to be involved in the advocacy. And then we are also mediators. Some of the disputes that comes before us as social workers, the family member would have hit somebody or they would have done a lot of things at home. And then as social workers, we have to sit in and resolve that issue as best as possible to ensure that the person can be reintegrated in the family setting. And then we're also empowerers. We assist our clients with whether it be skills-based training or refer them to places that they can get employment so that they're able to live fruitful lives. Specifically to Bellevue, a lot of the things that we do there involves discharge planning. And this is, I think, the hardest thing to do. And it is hard because a lot of persons do not understand mental illness. And so the first time the person is diagnosed with a mental illness and they come to the hospital for treatment, when they return, it is okay. They help and they go around and they assist the client. But when it happens again, and it happens again, and it happens again, you find that there are some changes in the thoughts of the family and their willingness to assist with the patient. And so when this happens, our job as social workers becomes extremely difficult because nobody wants to accept their relative. This is a sad reality of it. Nobody wants to accept their relative. And it gets worse because the government does not have a lot of things in place for our clients who are mentally ill. You can think about the homes and the shelters. A shelter for most of our clients is somewhere that they go from maybe 8 o'clock in the morning to take a shower and to have something to eat, and then on the road whole day. And if there's a space, even on the ground, then they're able to sleep at night. That is not good. That is not anything that any person would want for their loved ones. Also, when you think about other government facilities, there are not a lot of government facilities who are willing to accept our clients. Additionally, family members who they're saying that the family members cannot return to the family setting, then the private nursing homes are the only option. And for a lot of persons, this option is very expensive. And that is why I'm saying advocacy is something that we all need to be a part of, because there needs to be a place for the mentally ill in Jamaica. The hospital now is not, I know in the past, as the asylum, persons were dropped there and left for years and years. We have some persons like that there today, 20, 40 odd years. We cannot find any family members because a lot of persons have gone overseas, changed addresses, all of these things. But now the hospital is moving away from that. And so family members need to be actively involved in the care of their loved ones. We also do social investigations. So we go into the community, we go into the family setting, we go into the schools, because we cater to persons 18 and above, but sometimes these persons also have a child or children. And we have to ensure that these children are coping in the school setting. And so we have discussions with the guidance counselors and other members of the school team to ensure that special attention is given to these children. We also engage in group and individual counseling. We have what is called the patient support group at the hospital, where we try to get them ready for reintegration. So we do all life skills training with them and also individual counseling. Unfortunately, because the social work department is so small, there are only 6 of us, and it's 400 and almost 500 clients. We are not able to do in-depth individual counseling. We do what is called motivational counseling. And those cases that need in-depth counseling are recommended to the psychologists. We also help with limited resources, help clients access limited resources. So whether it be PATH or Jamaica Council for Persons with Disability, all kind of welfare services that are needed by our clients, we ensure that we link them to these resources. And then we also arrange transportation and accommodation, and we have what is called the family support group meeting that we are actively involved in. And I know we are going to have some questions on the panel, and you will hear some more of what happens at the Bellevue Hospital. But I just want to leave this with you, that as humans, and I call this, every presentation I do, I write it as the call. And the call is for us to recognize that mental illness is something that can affect any of us, right? We are here, we are logical today, but tomorrow, who knows what can happen to us? And so it is important for us to treat people as people. They have rights. Persons with mental illness, they have rights, they have privileges, and they have entitlements. Some persons believe that they are not supposed to live, and that is why you have persons who will attack our clients with mental illness. They don't believe they have a right to life, which is something that we know as Christians. We don't have any say in who lives or who dies. Only the Lord does. They also have freedom of speech, just like any one of us sitting here today. They can speak about their challenges. And so the doctors will also have this conversation. You know, what is happening with this medication? Everybody, just like you might say, this one caused me to sleep a lot. This one, they too have the right and freedom of speech. And they deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. There is a thin line between sanity and insanity. Today, if you or your relative is fine, we can give God thanks. And for those persons who are struggling, let us pray for them. Thank you.
Sisters and brothers, we have been given quite a lot to chew on in a very short period of time. You know, hindsight is 2020 vision. This should have been like a 4 o'clock, so we stay till 6, not true? Yes, because it's been really very interesting and professionally presented with grounding in spirituality, right? Yes. We will take some questions now. Can Mr. Wheeler turn on this mic so that they can use it for the questions? Or you can stand up, Paul. Paul, you can stand up.
Morning, everybody. The question that I would like to ask, you see, what are the symptoms in which a parent should look for when they have a mental ill child? And two, if beating can cause a child to get mental ill. And three, if so, can a parent be sent to jail for that?
That's an excellent question, very good question. The signs that you can pick up in an adolescent or a child is that one, they could be new onset bedwetting, they could become withdrawn, they could also start self-harming if you notice any scars on the skin or burns on the skin. If they're falling in schoolwork and you can't identify what the cause might be. And sometimes they blatantly will tell you that they're having a hard time. When they do say that, try to believe them. If they are not eating, you find that they are not finishing their meals, that's also a sign. Or if they keep on getting up during the night because they can't sleep. Those are the most common signs for children up to adolescence. Some younger children might just have constant tummy aches. That's a sign that you can pick up that it cannot be explained by any medical cause. Sometimes it can be due to other illnesses. If you see them talking to themselves, of course, or responding to things that you're not seeing, that's also another sign. And in terms of the beating, so Jamaica has a very, what I call, high tolerance for beating, right? And so it's a part of the disciplining process for a child, which is acceptable in our culture. Sometimes it can be very severe, and I do work with adolescents, and I think one of the things that they complain about is that they get beaten for everything. So it is like they develop a resentment towards their parents because that's the only method of disciplining that is used in the home. So one of the things I would endorse is for different types of disciplining, such as taking things away or just a stern speaking too, right? But beating can be very extreme. It can cause bruising. If they use anything to beat them, anything. And those persons can develop mental illnesses, particularly anxiety, even depression, and even schizophrenia. Yeah. So that's for question 1 and 2.
And as it relates to question 3 about whether or not parents can be locked up. So as Doc says, the severity when a children officer comes into play and does an investigation based on what is happening in the home setting, then the parents can be penalized.
As a follow-up to that question, just before we hear from the others, earlier you said Bellevue caters for 18 and over. What is the support for children who are less than 18? So apart from private consultation, what other support is there for persons who are not yet at that age?
The University Hospital of the West Indies does have an adolescent section. Adolescent or child psychiatry. So children are supported through that means in the public health setting.
Yes. The pediatric department also has a child and family clinic which deals with other things such as maybe eating disorders or other social issues. But there's also public health child guidance clinics, the Comprehensive Health Clinic and the Glen Vincent Health Clinic in Crossroads, which is in Kingston. There's one at St. Jago and there's one at Cornwall Regional Hospital.
I'll just jump in while Dr. Camille is speaking with Rev. I have 3 questions, but with time constraints, it might be difficult to ask all 3. But the first one is, we have been having in our schools incidences of children who are, well, the teachers, the educators say they are demon possessed, and they have been using that concept to deal with these issues. So the question I'm asking is, can seeing mental illness as demon possession, can that lead to challenges with treating the illness? That's one. And what is the difference between mental illness and good mental health? And thirdly, is we are aware of substance abuse and substance addiction. Can we speak of digital addiction, and can it lead to mental illness?
All right, so in terms of the difference between mental illness and mental health, as I mentioned in the presentation, good mental health leads to a person recognizing their potential, fulfilling their purpose, functioning, and having good relationships. So mental illness would be if any of those are affected and it is due to mental or emotional problems, right? As it pertains to digital addiction, the generations might be different in terms of boomers, millennials, Gen Zers, and so your use of digital space might be different. However, addiction is usually we characterize addiction based on time consumption, if it's affecting your productivity, if it is affecting your relationships with others, if the first thing you wake up and need is the digital, and if it is that because you don't have a digital, you cannot function otherwise. So those are some of the things that we might use to see if you would need to cut down or not. But some Gen Zers might defend that and say that we're being ridiculous. So it really depends on sometimes a generation. Some generations might not see the same. And in mental health, with any illness, with time, sometimes the bar might be lowered. So it's a very tricky subject to speak on, but I always look on functioning and relationships.
I think she had asked something about the demon possession and mental illness. Yes. I can just say from a social point of view, we have had those situations in the past, well, still, where relatives will take their loved one and say they're demon possessed, and they'll even tell you that the treatment won't help them, right? So it is a big barrier to treatment, and it is something that as social workers we have to do a lot of education so that they understand that, listen, we believe in God, right? And we believe that God would have inspired doctors to give medication. And if the medication is actually helping the client, why not take the medication while you pray for this person? So that is the approach that we have been using. But
yes, for sure. So yes, it does affect approach to care. I think if they believe that it's a demon possession only, they won't come to any service to get the help. They would probably bring to church, which is great because we're educating the church now, right, on how to deal with mental illnesses. But I do recognize that religion and spirituality is a big part of our culture, so I try not to shut persons out on that belief. I will say, okay, go ahead and pray and do the fasting if you can, etc., but also use the medication as a supplement or as an adjunctive treatment.
I have a question about caregiving. What resources do you have for caregivers taking care of their own mental health? Because that's a serious thing. Because your loved one is ill, then sometimes you become mentally ill by caring for them. So you need something to help the caregiver.
Okay, thank you. Excellent question. So there are things in place for caregivers of clients with mental illness. At the Bellevue Hospital, we have what is called a family support group meeting, and that's a monthly meeting that we have in which family members of our clients would come out and they would be supported. They are given the necessary information that they need. Not only that, they hear from other relatives and they cannot develop a coping mechanism, because as Doc would have said earlier, talk therapy helps a lot, right? So that is provided. You have other groups. I know Mensana takes place at the University Hospital of the West Indies, and there are other groups, maybe at Family Life Ministries and so, that offers this kind of support. But family members, what I find is that different, how do I put it, different class, to say, of family members look at mental illness differently. And so some persons will not come to these meetings because they don't see the need for this meeting. So if you are in need, or if you know somebody who needs additional support, I'm inviting them. Not because if your relative is being treated in a private setting, you can still come to a public family support group meeting, just to put that out there.
Okay, morning. Thank you so much for your presentations. Can you comment on substance abuse, especially among young people, and the extent to which you think there needs to be more advocacy, perhaps what you would say to somebody here who might be, being unduly pressured and so on? Because I think that we've been hearing more in the news about that.
Okay, so in Jamaica, the average age of first use or first exposure to substance use is actually the preteens between 10 and 12 years old, right? So we have to start targeting children from the prep school, primary school level in order to have education. Substance use is becoming actually more prevalent amongst adolescents because of accessibility and because of social media and the prevalence, especially so it's not just cigarettes, cannabis, and alcohol, but also the use of amphetamines and Molly is very popular even in the dancehall industry. So one of the ways to make sure not to make sure, because there's no absolute way you can stop a child from using it, there's no absolute way, but the ways to reduce risk are to have a good conversation with the child, make sure that it's an open conversation, that they can speak to you if they're being pressured. Education of substance use and its effects on the developing brain, which continues to develop up to the age of 25. Let's just reinforce that just because they're going to college does not mean it won't affect their brains. And also, studies have shown that if the parent is at home in the afternoons and follow up after school, that children are less likely to use substances.
I think this might be the last question, but first let me commend you all for the wealth of information, the coherent presentations. I want to know, for family members who have family members who might be mentally ill, they're at the stage where they're walking on the road naked, but that person does not think they're mentally ill and will not go with the family member to seek assistance. What options, and I know you spoke to rights of the individual, what options do these family members have to get the care for their loved ones?
And that is why I was hoping that we went through the resources that we need, because this is a challenge that we're having. So there is what we call the community mental health system in place that should assist family members in getting relatives to treatment. So when you have a number for your region, then it is required of you to reach out to these numbers and to get family members. Unfortunately, we have been told, and based on the Mental Health Act, police should assist, but that is not happening, right? So the other best method is to reach out to the community mental health groups. And they operate in your clinics too. These are the bus that goes around and they administer medication. They can also pick up your loved ones and bring them to Bellevue or another hospital.
Lastly, I know the time is up, but lastly, you can also reach out to UE Community Mental Health Team, and it does come with a fee, but as long as it is closer to the Halfway Tree up to Papine area, they can pick up your loved one, even if the loved one is naked on the road. And there's also private care pickup. Private care is very expensive. It's about $80,000, but it is an option. I just wanted to show that it's an option if you do need pickup. So UE, community mental health, public community mental health, and also privately.
We give God thanks for all of our presenters, and we thank God for everybody who played a part in today's session. I'm sure you'd agree with me that it was very beneficial, and I feel like we really probably do need a part 2. I'd like, though, to especially thank our guest presenters. So firstly, Dr. Spencer. Dr. Spencer, thank you for sharing with us about the importance of taking care of our mental health and the possible ripple effects of not doing that. Stress, we heard, can be a killer, which we all experience. Thanks for the tips on dealing with that. Thank you for the ways in which you try to break down some of the stigma associated with not just seeking care, but giving care. And we celebrate our heroes who, despite being labeled, still work with our mentally ill patients. And certainly as a church community, we're challenged in terms of our Christ-like response in terms of holistic care for our brothers and sisters. I invite you, Dr. Campbell, to just stand. One of the members of our Holistic Health Committee, Sister Tisha Smith, is helping us to present you with a small token of our appreciation. Okay, we just want a little photo up. Thank you, Doc. Thank you. All right, and Mrs. Titushaw, thank you for highlighting the importance of the social worker in managing patients struggling with mental health illnesses. We saw the social worker as an advocate, a broker, a mediator, and many other things, and we realized that you really do need support. Thank you for highlighting some of the challenges faced and showing us how, as a community, help is needed and how we can respond. Mrs. Titushaw, can you now stand as Sister Smith also gives you a token of our appreciation? Thank you. Oh, Sister Vivian Walker now. Thank you. Thank you, Mrs. Titushaw, and thanks again, everyone, for coming out.
One final comment, just in case everyone is not aware, the church does provide significant support in the form of support for mentally ill people. So, and of course, we always welcome persons who want to serve. So you can talk to Sister Gallimore or myself.